the Home Secretary has condemned as unacceptable thuggery the actions of demonstrators after angry clashes with police in central London. Hundreds of men converged in Parliament Square after far-right groups, including Britain First, called on supporters to protect monuments such as the Cenotaph and Sir Winston Churchill's statue. The protest quickly turned violent when the crowds turned on the police, pelting them with missiles and screaming abuse at officers. The protesters had ignored warnings from ministers and the police not to gather because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, this is the scene live right now at Trafalgar Square. The Metropolitan Police has warned protesters they must leave central London by 5 o'clock. That was just a few moments ago. Well, our correspondent John Ray reports on a day of clashes and angry confrontation.
For the first time in more than a week of largely peaceful protest, an air of menace hung over central London today. Fears of violence borne out directly in front of the House of Commons. Many hundreds answered the call of far-right groups to confront anti-racism demonstrators. Instead, they vented their fury at lines of police. There were smoke bombs detonated, and police were pelted with bottles and beer cans. All the time, the statues of Winston Churchill and others they had sworn to protect were safely cloaked behind sheets of grey steel, while the crowd tried to tear down barricades that blocked their way to the Cenotaph along Whitehall.
The atmosphere here has turned suddenly toxic. People here said they'd come to defend symbols of this nation's history. Instead, many have been involved in clashes with police.
This isn't actually Black Lives Matter that's causing this. It's Antifa, the fascists, the anti-fascists. They're the reason why people are here today.
Their original target had been a rival gathering of Black Lives Matter activists in nearby Trafalgar Square.
We got to be ready.
Here, numbers were modest. Organisers had urged supporters to stay away for fear of inflaming tensions. Those who defied that call said they wouldn't be intimidated.
If you are discriminated against every single day of your life, living in Britain as a British citizen, you wouldn't stay quiet. You would be out too. This is something that people have to say and have to change.
There were more skirmishes when what appeared to be a small group of far-right sympathisers broke through into Trafalgar Square.
Okay, if we can do this, this is a very good thing.
Amid the mayhem, we found this one brief moment of reconciliation. But this has been a day where dividing lines have looked more deeply drawn and more dangerous than ever. John Ray, ITV News, Parliament Square.
Well, let's go to some live pictures now of Trafalgar Square. We told you a few moments ago that that deadline had been set for 5 o'clock by the police for people to leave central London. The crowds have been thinning out over the last hour, but you can see there are still quite a few crowds there, although they do seem to be leaving. We think these are groups that are aligned with Black Lives Matter. The effort by the police over the last few hours has been to keep protesters away from those people. Well, there were also other demonstrations around the UK today. Several hundred people, many observing social distancing, gathered in the centre of Barry, South Wales, for a peaceful protest and speeches in support of Black Lives Matter. There was a noisy march through the streets of Aberdeen this afternoon as a Black Lives Matter protest called for continuous action to tackle racism. And in Brighton, around 1,000 protesters gathered together along the seafront on the south coast, also in support of the Black Lives Matter movement.